but involved in the policy of the counties as we go forth, setting the policy and implementing it. And it's been a great experience. But again, right now I'm the Chief Deputy County Executive, of Nassau. Thank you, obviously, for the invite, and we look forward to actually. The discussion is probably the best word to describe it. We've myself and Commissioner Crumpter have talked probably over the last 10 or 14 days, really what we can do in terms of crime and challenging the issue related to crime. And we have a couple of good ideas, and like we said, how dealing with this today is really to have a great dialogue and conversation to move the community forward in a positive manner. Because without that, none of us, I think we're all here for one reason, because we want to have a better community, for not only for all of us, but for our kids, or for those kids that haven't been born yet, that are going to be the future of, of this county. So.
I'm Tom Crumpter. I'm the first Deputy Commissioner of Police, and I have to say, for this conversation and having to be cross-examined by Mr. Brewington. So, on a personal level, I thank you for the invitation. But with that's my one attempt at a joke. I'm not a funny person. My wife reminds me of that all the time.
That's pretty good, by the way.
So I have to tell you, it's I love the opportunity to be with the community. Just by way of background, I've served on the executive staff of the Commissioner of Police since Commissioner Willett, Commissioner Lawrence, Commissioner Mulvey. I was the acting commissioner for a year, and now Commissioner Dale. So I've been around for a long time. I'm very involved on a national level. I sit on multiple committees with major city chiefs. Major city chiefs represents the 72 biggest police departments. Actually, I was scheduled to come back tomorrow, but when I was given the opportunity to be here today, I cut my trip down to Philadelphia short because I think this is a great opportunity, just from a policing perspective. There are two different types of law enforcement executives in this country and in every way you go. And one is arrest the world, and the other is more of a social approach to dealing with crime. I sort of fall in the middle. I take a holistic approach. I don't believe that there's a right answer and a wrong answer, and in the initiatives I've been involved in over the last several years, everything we've done, we've tried to take a holistic approach, whether it was drugs, whether it was guns in the corridor, Roosevelt and Uniondale, out portion of the corridor, or it doesn't matter. We always take a holistic approach. We use intelligence-led policing in Nassau County. We use an evidence-based approach. So those are the things we do. We don't, we target individuals that are problematic in the community, and that's really what we focused on Roosevelt and Uniondale, and we've made huge strides in crime in Roosevelt and Uniondale. ShotSpotter is one of my proudest accomplishments in Nassau County. I actually lectured earlier today at the IACP, International Association of Chiefs of Police, with the ShotSpotter technology on that. And when we started the ShotSpotter system, the first full year in 2010, we had 330 shooting incidents that were captured by the ShotSpotter system. We went out and tested that system when we first brought it online. We fired over 4 dates, over 80 locations, hundreds and hundreds of rounds, and we got no gunshots. Well, in 2010, the first full year, we had 333 incidents of shots fired. That could have been 1 shot or 10 shots. In 2011, we had 77 shots being fired. And last year in 2012, we had 27. So we reduced gunshot incidents in the corridor, Roosevelt and Uniondale, by 97%. And that is the empirical data, and that tells half the story. The other is the subjective. Started with the conversation being nobody called about shots when we tested. When we originally tested, nobody called. When we actually did a test last year, when we're now testing some camera equipment that we had that was going to work in conjunction with ShotSpotter, passive camera equipment, the phones were ringing off the hook at a couple locations. And what that told me was people now will not accept shots in the Roosevelt and Uniondale era. And I believe the community is safer. I believe the community believes they're safer. And so, with an evidence-based approach, what I mentioned earlier, things that I view, you are starting to see a difference there. We believe that we have crime in the police district. We're doing a good job, but we don't believe that that's the end of the conversation. We start to have the conversation of, just by way of background, there's a headquarters tax and a district tax. For those that live in the police district, they pay both. For those that are in the village, they pay one. Historically in the Nassau County Police Department, and by historically in the last 88 years, we as a department haven't paid as much attention to the areas that we're not primarily responsible for patrolling. And I think, based on my conversations with the Deputy County Executive, I think that, and the County Executive for that matter, I think it's time that that changes. And so I welcome the opportunity to be here. I think there's a lot of things that we can do. I find creative ways to get things done. And, it's obviously in Nassau County, in September of 2008, we had 2,750 police officers. And today we have just over 2,200. But at the same time, we reduced crime in the district area where we constantly really focus by approximately 20%. So we've lost 20% of our sworn headcount, and we've lost 20% of the crime. So when you start to look at that, it's counterintuitive, right? More cops, less crime, less cops, more crime. We did the exact opposite. We did it because we changed the way we view policing. We use programs that we know to work, based on empirical studies, based on academic studies, whether it's hotspot policing. Chief Ramsey, one of the people, is the chief of Philadelphia Police Department. For those that don't know, former chief of Washington, D.C., and prior to that, the superintendent of Chicago. One of the leaders in American law enforcement. Recently just did a study, and we don't target, wide nets anymore. We use a scalpel, and what we do is we target individuals and locations that have propensity for criminal activity. And that's proven to work. We've also done a lot of programs from a social standpoint with drugs. Nassau County funded Too Good for Drugs. We funded educational awareness programs. We just did a commercial infomercial. So we look at things problem from a holistic approach, and we attack it from both sides. Because there's a lot of things that work, there's a lot of things that don't work. But when we take those items that work, we can really make a difference. So if I am going to get off my soapbox now, and I'm dying to hear what you have to say. We have more that we'll be talking about shortly.
Thank you so much. Just when we introduce our other guests, you're back a second, you're returning.
Yeah, I was here last week, so.
Tell
Brian Nugent, Director of Governmental Operations.
Brian, why don't you tell everybody what you do, just so
I
everybody
actually I oversee for the County Executive's Office, the Department of Human Services, Social Services, Veterans. Well, Human Services consists of Youth Board, Mental Health, Chemical Dependency, and Seniors. I also do Veterans. I also do Consumer Affairs, and I also.
Do all these other people know that you're doing them?
What? Yeah. Be careful when I'm speaking with an attorney.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, you say you're.
I act as
you
like the
oversee each of
liaison between the county executives. They all have their own commissioners, directors, depending on the department, and then if they need, it might be budgetary issues, it might be, they need something moved, they need a document signed. A lot of the contract stuff, when I see the contract slow down, I personally try to jump in and move them around. During the year, it's broken up, contract season. I spend a lot of time making sure that every contract gets there as fast as they can. We had some success, but, I know this is a police meeting, so I don't want to get in, and we're going to have another meeting with our human services people, but, during that time of the year, I'll make sure that I try my best to get them to the, through the various departments. We've done a lot with the nonprofit task force that really tries to get identify the 84-day process that it takes to get. We've made a lot of success that a lot of people have taken advantage of my success, because where I've saved time, I've had other departments or other agencies in the county might have taken their time. And a lot. We went through this. A lot of it was Sandy related and things like that. But I know there's a limited time, and we get like these two gentlemen here. I wouldn't waste my time talking to me.
We just didn't want to. We didn't
You
want
can call me any day, and I'll talk to you.
We try not to ignore folks. So,
I just had such a good time last week that I wanted to come back.
liaison.
He's the hardest man, the hardest working man in Nassau County government. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. I've had the pleasure of working with you in different capacities. I've had the pleasure of arguing with you on different capacities. While I'm not here representing any nonprofit organization, one of the things that's definitely a concern to us has to do with the homicide rates and serious violence that occurs within the corridor. And so, one of the things that we experience is that while you may tout the decrease in numbers, take it from someone that lives in the corridor, that lives in the area of Uniondale in particular, someone where there was a shooting in last May, and at the end of August, we had a murder right next door at 10:30 in the morning on a Sunday. So I commend you for the job that you all are doing. But what I can tell you is that for those of us that live in the community and experience this on a daily basis and hear gunshots and Unfortunately, we have to lie to our children and tell them those were firecrackers, throughout the entire year. It's very real. And we have some serious issues in the county as far as, funding for nonprofits that are keeping our kids safe, that are keeping our kids occupied. And the fact that much of that funding went away and was magically restored during an election year. We love that. We hope that it doesn't go away after the election year or anytime during the next 4 years. We also have a challenge in that, some of the folks in this room actually work for the Nassau County Youth Board. And, this was a department that was gutted. And we lost over a century's worth of experience in that process. I love the fact that, Commissioner Crumpter, you state that this is about a holistic approach. We find that the young people in our communities, in the corridor, are the ones that literally fuel the pipeline from failing schools, poor schools, into that detention center and jail. We've been able to compare, for example, the approach that the county and municipalities have taken when it comes to heroin, and it's launching PSAs and prevention campaigns and all that kind of stuff, and we don't really see the same happening in our communities as far as youth violence and gang and gun violence. So the first question really has to do with the homicide rate. How many people have we lost this year, and out of those, how many have passed away in what we would consider the corridor?
Okay, the corridor is an interesting thing. I hate to say this, and in the Nassau County Police District, there's been, I believe, 11 homicides year to date. That's all of the Nassau County Police District.
That's what you patrol, right?
That's the area we patrol.
Without,
In
okay.
Hempstead and Freeport, I don't have their exact numbers at the moment, so please excuse me. I actually drove in from Philadelphia, so it's kind of,
We understand.
but right now, Hempstead has virtually the same number of murders. And, that I consider a problem. And one of the things I've had a meeting with Detective Ned and a new group that they formed, as a matter of fact, 2 weeks ago. And we're having follow-up meetings about some of those, working out some MOAs and some agreements with them going forward. And, obviously, what I would like to do going forward is over the next, several days and weeks, I would like to work with the Hempstead and Freeport Police Department and really do something we did for the heroin that paid huge dividends. And that really is create a corridor task force to deal with the criminal side. And what we would do is we would use our intelligence-led policing models. One of the places we haven't cut in this police department is intelligence-led policing. In September,
This is what we were talking about, doing a holistic approach. Some of our models, obviously, we've learned, and you start taking data upon data. So one of the options that we have available to us is having more of that collaborative effort. Because there really, as much as there isn't. Let's be very honest. You talk about data, transfer of data. I'll give a perfect example. We had, someone's a simple. I'll use this only because I know about it. A simple car was stolen. The car wound up in the Hempstead impound yard. Less than 24 hours later, we found out about it 14 days later. So and that's just on a stolen car. So you can only imagine the data flow that we need to have and continue to have. And that's what Tom will go into this really pilot program that we want to create with this task force.
so basically one of the places that we haven't cut is in September of 2008, we had 8 crime analysts. As of today, we currently have approximately 16 analysts and another 10 detectives that are dedicated to intelligence as sergeant. And then Patty Ryder was one of the most visionary people you'd ever want to meet. He's a detective sergeant, oversees asset and intel, dynamite, and really is a taskmaster, one of the hardest working people we ever met. He was coming out of a minor procedure on Friday in recovery, and he's on the phone with me, and I'm like, what are you doing? So that's him, but he works nonstop. I talk to him at 11 o'clock at night, I talk to him at 7 o'clock in the morning, and he's really gets the job done. So it would center driven on the intelligence in my vision, and obviously we have to work with Hempstead and Freeport. And what we do is we have a criminal intelligence rapid response team. They're the pointed spear of the intelligence unit. They take actionable intelligence and they act on it. We also have the Bureau of Special Operations. We take members from that. We also have details, robust details in the 1st and the 3rd precinct. We take members from them. Also to assist, we would take special investigation squad detectives. We would take detectives from narcotics. And those are where we have people that we have a certain degree of flexibility. That's why we'd be looking to take them. We would ask for Hempstead and Freeport to put some bodies in because they have the knowledge of the streets in that communities a lot more than we do. We would then start to build out.
And you really can't do it without their involvement.
Right. This has got to be a collaborative effort. We got to all work together, and that's really what it comes down to. So we would take those people and we form a task force. Then what we would, that's the one side, that's the enforcement side. That I can do very well, and that's the easy part for me. We would then be looking for organizations such as DAS to work with us. Again, everything I do is looking at the holistic, to start to work on some programs in that side, but using an evidence-based model, programs that we know to work. And that would require a little bit more, research and a little bit more work, and start to push in those directions where we establish partnerships with not-for-profits. The police department this is, which is a unique situation. Right now, currently, I have 2 MOAs with not-for-profits. One is Domestic Violence Coalition, and one is Parents for Megan's Law. So we don't have a lot of them. Domestic Violence Coalition is a nationally touted program where we actually work with them, and one of the big things they do is for victims of sex crimes and child abuse, we actually have a co-location with the district attorney, the police officers, detectives investigating, and the social workers that handle those types of incidents, all are co-located. So when a victim isn't victimized 3 times, 4 times by having to be interviewed 3 or 4 times, they're interviewed once, and everybody else observes it. Whoever the appropriate person is for the interview, whether it's the DA, whether it's our detectives, whether it's the social workers, and those interviews are done in specially designed rooms. As a matter of fact, this year, the county executive has authorized the expenditure of $50,000 to redo their room and add a second room with the equipment. So it is, so we find creative solutions. We use JAG funds, we use other alternative funding and our operating funds in order to maximize our relationships. Obviously, with the police department and with a $750 million budget, you would think I have a lot of money. I really don't. Big chunk of that is dedicated to the salaries of our police officers. But what we do is I maximize the return of every single dollar that we get in the police department. One of the things I didn't mention is, just by way of background a little bit, just finished my master's degree in criminal justice, but my bachelor's degree is in accounting, so I'm a process person by nature. I worked in accounting before I became a cop, and I'm a process person, and that's the way I look at things. I look at everything from workflows and processes and controls, so that's just ingrained in my DNA. Numbers and how things are interrelated are ingrained in my DNA. So what we would look to do is, this is an opportunity similar to what I've talked about 2 weeks ago with Detective Ned and his group. And, I welcome the opportunity here, and again, thank you very much. So that would be the 2 different approaches. We'd be looking to work with the Village of Hempstead, the Village of Freeport, putting in a number of resources dedicated to the corridor, not just only focused on Roosevelt and Uniondale, which we've historically done. So when you talk about crime, I agree with you. Crime in Roosevelt and Uniondale, we've made huge strides, and I can produce the data for the first precinct. It's really driven our crime numbers because we've made such great strides. But that doesn't mean we're done, and that doesn't mean there's not a lot more work to do.
When I asked you for the numbers, one of the things that we definitely like to start doing, and it'll come out of an initiative such as this, is we want to address the issue of youth violence as an epidemic, as a health epidemic. And we need law enforcement and county government to stand up and really acknowledge that. And so when we talk about these numbers, the loss of life, particularly young life, in our communities as a result of violence, or the amount of funding that we spend on incarcerating folks, or even worse, at the numerous hospitals when it comes to youth violence, are astronomical, the cost to the county. And so one of the things that we're really looking for is to get, the county exec's office and law enforcement to join forces with this body here and other individuals, including clergy and community-based organizations, and saying these 16 analysts that you have can without a doubt pinpoint the number of stabbings, assaults, violent crime that occurs in our communities, to finally say, okay, we have this problem, and really start working on constructive ways. You have models that work. I mean, in the first precinct, one of the best working relationships you've had in the history of the county police department working with nonprofits is the Uniondale Violence Intervention Partnership. So if you talk to Sergeant O'Mara, we have put guns in Sergeant O'Mara's hands that we've been able to get from other individuals. We've been able to call on our colleagues, whether they're school resource officers in Uniondale High or Roosevelt High. There's a relationship that's already established there. But it makes it extremely difficult when there's funding cuts and there's all these different things where organizations that have developed a niche now have to go fight for crumbs, really, when you think about it. When in reality, you know, we're spending this money on the back end, but we're not investing on the front end. We have law enforcement colleagues that are now taking a model that we developed with Uniondale Violence with the Uniondale Violence Intervention Partnership, and we're now starting to develop a street team that wants to go out. Whenever there's a serious crime, you know, we already have individuals here that have been going out. One of the things that we want to do is formalize this process. I spoke to Sergeant O'Mara a couple of days ago. Young man that was followed from here into Uniondale, chucking guns, I mean heavy artillery out the vehicle, lives around the corner from me, got arrested there. So it's this communication that is really critical, and we want to make sure that we get a commitment, you know, from this point forward saying, okay, we know there's an epidemic, we know there's an issue, but it needs to be addressed as a health issue, not just a law enforcement issue. And really finding points when it comes to intervention early on. So we know for a fact that the youth that are being charged as adults at 14, 15, 16, 17, these individuals will find it extremely difficult to break the cycle of incarceration and ever become productive citizens. So we want to know that we also have the support of you folks, the same way we would take a kid that's getting high off of heroin and is selling heroin. Now we catch a kid that may be selling crack, and you know, we send him up the, you know, we don't give him the same breaks. We want to make sure that we develop these points of intervention and start working collectively to gather that same information you're talking about, because we know that our kids have dreams just like everybody else's kids. It's just the community's circumstances and poverty that's creating a vicious cycle. So,
and you know,
I think we tie in I think it's important to tie in probation. I know we're not going to talk about you know, youth board today or human services, but I think we tie in you know, CDBG. CDBG can be used for other type of not-for-profit programs. I think it's crucial to do that. I think this all coincides even with foreclosure rates and things of that nature. All of it is a collaborative effort. I think that's what we're trying to do. So I think it's important going forward that we include probation. You know, we've already started taking that role with the Juvenile Detention Center with case intake and actually evaluating, because the last thing you want to do is just incarcerate a person to incarcerate when all we know is just no matter how old they are, they're just going to go back out and do it again because they're not getting the programs or the assistance that they really need. So we've started that, you know, pretty much relatively new with the juvenile intake processing, and you know, where the probation staff literally sits, you know, with the individual, and you know, again, you know, 14-year-olds, 12-year-olds, you know, 16-year-olds. It is scary, and you know, they're crying for help. You just talk to them, they're crying for help, and they've never been able to get it for so many different reasons. Right? But look, how many some of their parents have 3 jobs or 4 jobs. It's all of it ties together. So I think this is an opportunity that we really, you know, I said before, it's very crucial that we have to have Hempstead and Freeport police departments involved, because it really does work. But it's even more so to have probation, to have our youth board, obviously, but also with this additional funds with the you know, our Department of Community Development and Homeless Services, to tie them into this process, as well as social services. That we really need to have those conversations. We recently applied for a grant. I think you know, one that I think we should be receiving the award because of the great project that is actually led by the probation department. It's all about taking youthful offenders and providing them with the services and the programs that they need. So, you know, we can have a regular once-a-week meeting with everyone involved, break it up into smaller groups, and come up with a real program. This is the opportune time to do it. You have the state pushing this process forward. You know, as everyone probably knows or doesn't know, you know, the state's really looking for, you know, decrease of you know, detained detention. So you know, go to non-detained detention or other you know, forms of programming. So this is an opportune time to do it. We have dollars in place that can do it. That's the good thing. You have the commitment from us to in fact do it for a multitude of reasons. It's a good thing to do. It saves us money, because the last thing you want to have you know, is people detained. It just costs so much. providing programs, real programs that are going to help so many people is less costly. So the commitment's there to work with you through that. I think we got to get everyone together to in fact do that. It can't be just, you're right, Sergio, it can't be just the police department matter. It's not going to do any good.
And we're committed to youth board for the remainder, for the next 4 years.
Yes,
100%.
the county executive's already said that, and we're gonna look to see if we can put additional resources, and we're gonna put additional, that's what I said about the CDBG funding. It's more important to look for other avenues by which we can receive funding. And being the fact that we are not supplanting any dollars by having fully funded, we now can look at CDBG. I know we're not talking about today, but it does dovetail together on providing additional resources.
Dennis?
And intake. What about the mental health? Do you have a relationship with them? Because very
Well,
often in this
100%.
work, you find that.
Definitely. One of the reasons why the county executive, we put together, now we have Department of Human Services. Department of Human Services consists of Office of Physically Challenged, Senior Citizen Affairs, Mental Health, Chemical Dependency, Drug and Alcohol, as well as, one of my missing youth board, was to put it together to break up some of the silos. Because it was very silo driven. When you came in and you had, you potentially had a drug and alcohol problem, well, it could have also been derived because it was, you could have had a mental health issue, could have been a senior citizen that had fallen hard times. That has resulted in a lot of collaboration among staff. They're actually now competing together for grants, working together with grants instead of competing against each other. When you have a problem, I can take you right to the person next to me. You don't have to go down to another department. It's really worked very well. And it's it's in its infancy. It's only 2 years. Where the bigger problem we're now having with mental health is the state has cut tremendously the amount of programs. In fact, I met, I ran it over the weekend with, somebody from Family and Children's Services, and we started getting into it. He goes, the county has funded, we have funded all the programs. In fact, when there was a small cut, it was, I'm sorry?
I'm sorry,
Yeah,
go
no.
ahead.
So now it's working with the state to make sure that everything is funded as well. Because again, everybody's looking, you can cut that program, you can cut this program. One of the things we're looking at, very important with social services, is that social services is the state's going to the administrative takeover of Medicaid. When they go through that takeover, we are looking already with our staff, how we can now put that staff into other areas that have had problems or can aid and assist with other people. So there's going to be no terminations by any means. We're literally going to take that staff and use them in other parts of the programs. Or such as this, when you start developing new programs, now you have staff that you can put people that have the knowledge, have the background. A lot of these are social welfare examiners. They're on the front line. You could do a lot of things with them. So.
Well, let me just ask this. One of the things that, you mentioned, talking about the places that Nassau County patrols as opposed to the ones that you actually don't. Right now, could you please tell us the actual relationships that you have with those two police forces, Freeport and Hempstead, because it does not seem as though one hand knows what the other hand is doing, and it does not seem like you're a hand in the glove.
One of the things that we've been working on is one of the big things that I've been very involved in, and the county executive has agreed, was starting to breaking down those silos that existed between the villages and the county. One of the first things that we did was we were looking at two things simultaneously. The one thing we got off without a hitch, and I'll go into the second item, and that was communications. As silly as this sounds, every one of the 19 villages in Nassau County had their own radio systems. The county funded and grants funded over $3 million in radio purchases to bring them on our new radio system. Communications is the key. So what you had is, I worked in 516 in Lakeview when I was a cop on patrol, and I was dependent on the backup from Rockville Center.
You told me you better have the right answers, or he's going back to 516.
That's all
They
right.
told me.
516 right next to 512.
Yes. Rockville, Center, Glenbrook, and Malvern, I depended on for assistance. Now, they were really good, and they monitored our radio frequencies, but I had no idea what they were doing. So, they were involved in something. Until it came over my dispatch, I had no idea they were involved in it, and that creates a problem. So we're working on now, and that's, all the villages are migrating from their existing radio systems now, slowly but surely, because again, I can't tell them what to do. But when you turn around and you give them $3 million of radios, you give them a more sophisticated radio system that's encrypted, you know, and it's free, and they don't have to pay to maintain it, and I don't have to pay any more additional to maintain my system because it's that robust. That sort of brings them on. The other piece that we're doing that was even more important than that was we had a new RMS system that we were bringing online. We ran into problems with that
RMS?
Record, I'm sorry,
Record
please
management
excuse me.
system.
I should never do that, you
That's
know.
okay.
Uh,
We'll ask the right questions.
no, it's a records management system. It's where we store all the data. It's every arrest report, every case report, every field interview. That's where all the data is. Well, each one of the villages have their own records management system. So I don't know what's in.
Even though they use your forms, a lot
They-
of them.
A lot of them use our forms, but they just print out our forms out of their system.
Mm-hmm.
So now we start to break down that for a temporary, where Impact is the one company, and we now have access to the Impact. That's the bulk of the villages. There's a Total is the other company. In the next several weeks, I will be submitting a request to the county executive to modify the capital plan. And what my plan is, again, the same thing, is we fund under the headquarters tax, because that's all encompassing the county. We fund the software, the training, the connectivity, and the service for those villages that allows us to all be on a single common system. So what you basically have is an environment where the system in the first precinct, just as a side note, everybody knows that the construction of the first precinct should be starting momentarily. That was approved by NIFA
Contracts were
finally.
approved.
The contracts were all approved, and they should be getting a shovel on the ground there. So, you know, the precinct's not closing; it is remaining open. So what happens is the first precinct is a command, but then Hempstead would be a command, but all the data would rest in a single environment, which makes the analysis and, you know, the intelligence-led policing models we use work all the better. Right now, Hempstead uses Impact. We now have access to Impact, but to show you that since the advent of computers in Nassau County, it's only been in the last couple of months that we actually have access to those systems. So what I liken it to is, and I use 516 a lot because I work there, and if we have a burglary pattern, let's use a robbery pattern. We have a robbery pattern where I have a robbery in Lakeview. Okay, I have a robbery in Rockville Center. I have a robbery in Lynbrook. I have a robbery in Malvern. Well, I had 4 robberies. That clearly defines a pattern. Okay, we can start to do things with that. We can start using very sophisticated models of analytics to start looking at, you know, solving that crime. But with the current system, up until recently, we didn't know about those other 3 robberies. So all I have is an isolated robbery in Malvern. Can't really do much with a single isolated event. So now what we're doing is we're pushing in a direction of breaking down those silos, because I agree with you. You know, the best way to do this is everybody have a complete set of data. And we've done a lot of that in the last couple of years, and I can give you a lot of examples on how that's been improved in the last 4 or 5 years. And, you know, again, that's, you know, one of the things that I'm really focused on. But those 2 things would go to, you know, be a huge way to actually, you know, working towards using that scalpel in defining crime. You know, there's 2 things, and, you know, it's, you know, from a crime standpoint, is that people have to realize is that 80 to 90% of police activity occurs in about 10% of the locations. And this is not Nassau County, this is anywhere, any municipality. So 80 to 90% of the criminal activity. On the same token is the vast majority of crime is committed by a very small group of individuals. So what we try to do is we try to focus on addressing those small group of individuals and those small groups of, you know, locations. And to put that in perspective, you know, I showed a video today, and we had the ShotSpotter system. We deployed it, and in 2012 we came up with 2 locations, or 3 locations, excuse me, that had a high propensity for gunshots. Well, we put 3 cameras in the Roosevelt Uniondale area. 3. That was all. And we put them into those 3 locations. Inside of several weeks, we actually had caught on video the 2 shootings. One at one location, that was a drive-by with a number of gang members. One at a second location, which was another drive-by shooting by gang members of a non-gang member. Now, in both cases, you know, it wasn't just the indiscriminate placing of cameras, because I don't have 3,000 cameras to put in Roosevelt and Uniondale. It was about using a scalpel, using a surgical approach, and in that case, rather than this violence escalating and these shootings escalating, ending up in somebody being shot, what ended up happening was the individuals responsible were arrested, and there was nobody injured. But you know, we all know about retaliatory gang shootings that escalate till somebody either gets arrested or somebody gets shot. So in that case, we used a very surgical approach in addressing that situation. I mean, I showed the video today because, and that's the question I ask, you know, is, and this is to chiefs, and the question I ask is, how many cameras do you think I had up that I actually caught a shooting? And the numbers, oh, you had hundreds, you had this, you had that. No, I had 3. So again, it's using data and driving the data is what we try to do from the criminal approach. You know, focusing on the right group of people and the right locations, and that's really what we try to do.
Quick question is.